Fantastic. Thank you, everybody. Well, welcome to the amazing HyFlex conference and our student panel focused on AI. I am so excited to have the amazing Marco, Jacob, and Zora here to talk about AI, both pros and cons. And so I'm going to have them all do introductions, and you can introduce yourself, your affiliation, and what you do, and then we'll go on to panel questions. So, Marco, if you want to start us off.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. My name is Marco Brego. I'm a graduate student at SFSU. My master's is in instructional design and technology, and coming up on almost the end of it. So I've been very excited to work in the process and learning so much more as we've been discussing. Kind of this co past COVID world that we live in is changed so many things, and so I'm very interested to learn and talk more about AI. So, come see everybody.
Awesome. We're so happy to have you here. And Jacob.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jacob. Good morning or good afternoon, actually. In the East Coast, I was a student of the Hunter School of Education 2 years ago. I got my 7 through 12 license, but I also now have my K through 12 certificate.
Thank you so much. And Zora.
Hello, everyone. So my name is Zora. I use they them pronouns. I just added that to my name thingy. Didn't realize it wasn't there. I am currently a student in the Masters in SPED K through 12 at Hunter. I am a relatively early career teacher. I have some experience, I have brief experience at a charter school, and then I'm going to be working at a performance-based assessment transfer high school this coming fall. I'm very, very, very oriented in sort of inquiry-based instructional methods. So that means a lot of literacy, that means a lot of questions, that means a lot of interaction, and general like joyful tangent following. I think which will be made clear while I talk. I also want to mention that I am a career changer. So I used to work in publishing, and I have a great deal of history in comics. And a lot of my friends are creative, a lot of creatives, a lot of my friends still work in editorial or in the industry. So that's also where I'm bringing my perspectives from.
Yeah, and I so appreciate that, right? All of you have been in a high flex environment of some kind.
Yeah.
All of you are very used to multimodal teaching and learning. And so you're such amazing people to have on this panel with both experience in high flex as well as AI. So we are going to go to our first question, which is when you think about AI as a learning tool, what role do you believe it should play in your education, and where do you think the limits should be? And again, I'll have Marco start, and then I'll have you all hop on.
Sure. My view of it is maybe I don't know, maybe it's limited, but the way I like to use it is very similar to having a classmate. So where if I have a question or I don't understand, or I say, you know what, I have this idea, but I'm not quite sure how to flush this out. How do I flush this out? And so I prompt it and say, here's what I have. This is what I'm thinking. What can you help me with? And in fact, do me a favor, ask me some questions on my thought process because that way it's gonna, develop my thought process even further into going, okay, I like this direction or I don't like this direction. And sometimes it may produce something where I go, no, that's not what I want. This is the direction I want you to head. And this is my end goal, in fact. So can you guide me in that direction? Or perhaps sometimes I've done it where I'm writing a paper and I say, okay, how do I organize my thoughts? This is what I have. This is what I've thought about, and this is what. So I'm coming to it with something. I'm not coming to it and saying, give me instead. So I'm coming up with something and then saying, okay, help me develop this a little further. So I look at it a lot like a classmate that might be sitting next to me and looking over, the same things that we've gone over in class. That's my view on it.
Yeah, there's definitely a science to AI prompting. I appreciate that
Hmm.
so much. Jacob and then Zora.
Sure. I mean, I use it in basically the same way. I was a kid with an IEP, which is also why I got my SPED license because I feel like I want to help students get the help that I didn't get when I was in high school. And so part of that is helping me, like Marco was saying, flesh out my ideas or figure out where am I missing what I'm writing or when, like, even when I'm writing an email to when I was writing emails to professors, sometimes I'd be a little annoyed with them and I'd be like, okay, does this have a tone that shouldn't have that tone? It's all like sometimes it's just really about making sure what I'm writing is okay. And I don't always have someone next to me, like Marco was saying, to look over my writing and say, oh yeah, you can definitely send this to a professor. Or like you can definitely put this in a writing when you're expressing yourself. It's all about like figuring out the right way in the right time you can. And limits with that, no, yeah, limits. I think there's sometimes limits where you do have professors, you do have writing coaches, you do have things at a school, especially in a college, that are there to support you. And I understand as like I was a night student, and I found it hard to sometimes always find them and what being available because I did work at during the day. So there are limits, but there's also a lot of pluses to it when you're in school.
Yeah, so I come from perhaps a different perspective. I find it very, very important when we're talking about AI to specify what we are talking about. Um, we call AI artificial intelligence, but it's not. It is quite artificial. It is absolutely not intelligence. AI, as we know it, is currently a collection of large language models and a lot of like corpus analysis and pattern reproduction models, right? So when we talk about generative AI, we are actually not using the most precise language that we could to be talking about the models. We call them generative. Realistically, they are exclusively reproductive. Um, so I find it incredibly important to structure interaction with AI such that we are making use of its reproductive capabilities, but not misleading ourselves into believing that it is actually generating new ideas or making novel connections that have not been made by human beings elsewhere in the world. AI has been programmed by people. The data that it is pulling from has been generated by people, or increasingly has been regenerated by AI, interpreting and potentially mixing up and misinterpreting things that have been created by people. So it is just as fallible, if not more, than individual humans who you communicate with. So while I think it can be really valuable to have AI generate a list of questions for self-analysis, um, referring to AI as a classmate is a step down a pathway to artificial humanization of a thing that is fundamentally not human and fundamentally not capable of making the novel connections that human brains are capable of making. And so that's where I come from, right? AI should be used reproductively, potentially, but thinking of it as a companion, thinking of it as a collaborator is like thinking of a hammer as a collaborator. The hammer is not making decisions, it's doing what I tell it to do. And ultimately, that's always going to be something that we are doing with AI. We are always telling it to do something.
I appreciate you grounding us in those definitions. I think there was a chat too.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so, can you all share, right, and from multiple perspectives, a time when AI supported you in learning something instead of just helping you complete an assignment, right? And this something does not have to be academic related, it can be outside the academic environment.
I can actually start because it's a 180 from what I was just talking about. I very much come off as an AI hater, and I don't think that's necessarily inaccurate because I have really strong opinions about the like physical environmental impacts that AI have. However, um, I had a really wonderful director of inclusive learning at the charter school I worked at, which was not necessarily emblematic of the rest of my experience at that school. But she was incredibly brilliant. And she was very aware that her job required her to learn a great deal of information um, throughout the uh, sorry. She had to learn a great deal of like standards for K through 8 across subject matter. And if anybody has ever read any standards, which I expect we all have, they are a nightmare. And so she understood that using very, very precisely developed GPT instances that didn't have access to search engines, but did have access to the large language models, allowed her to have a lot of control over how the AI, what the GPT instance was analyzing and reproducing. And she used it incredibly efficiently and incredibly reliably to upload standards PDFs and have the AI crunch through all of that like incredibly inaccessible, unapproachable language and produce much more legible standards for both herself and the teachers she was working with, as well as generate prerequisite skills for those standards. And she asked us, as she distributed this material, she asked us to review it with the same criticality that we would review information coming from a peer, right? Not just trusting it because it came out of the computer, but thinking critically as we read the information, fact checking the standards against the standards in the PDFs, and also gut checking those prerequisites to figure out if there was something missing or something that was actually not necessary. And so that was really great. It was incredibly helpful as a new teacher who was like trying to wrap their head around all of the standards.
Jacob or Marco?
Yeah, I can go. Sorry, kind of losing my voice. So there are two different times. I have at my old school, there was something called project-based assessments where I taught, and they were massive. Like they would be 15 to 20 pages these students had to write, and it'd be history papers. And there's an AI that just came out called Notebook LM, and it actually breaks it down for the students so that they can see where they have to research. What do they have to research? It helps them find the research, especially as a special ed teacher, where there's so much research out there. They don't, students don't know always how to like break down that research into actual meaningful data for them to find. And it was so much easier for them to find what they needed based off of like, okay, let's look for this certain subject. And then it broke it down for them. And then there was a second time that actually is the most recent. My mother has a lot of old postcards from Russia. We don't know Russian. We don't know any of that. And it's been really cool to try to find the family tree and make a family tree with that. But also we've been having AI translate the Russian into English so we could try to figure out history of where we're coming from in Russia, how everything is connected, and like where's like different parts of our family that we've lost. So that's been really, really cool.
And for me, I feel like honestly, I've struggled with this question because I don't use it much in other ways, other academically, because one, it's I'm trying to limit the amount of usage of it. I think I want to be conscious about when I use it. But last year when I was studying a little bit of coding, and I was really just stumped on how it worked. And so I used it and said, this is what I have. Again, I talked a little bit about like coming to it, presenting what I have already and saying, okay, this is what I have, and this is where I'm missing something. I don't know what I'm missing. Can you show me what I'm missing and explain it to me? Why would I have done this? And so that was able to give me not just the code, but tell me, okay, this is why this is important, and this is probably why you missed it. And then again, it makes me be a little more reflective of my process and think about, okay, I see where I got wrong, and that way I can learn from my mistake, not just saying, give me the answer. Because if I just get the answer, then it's just an answer. That's that. working with children in my prior career, if you ask me a question, I can give you the answer, but if I can explain it to you and you can take that back and process it and take it, and that little nugget is going to shape its way into different answers for you, not just in the moment, but in the future. And so that's how I look at AI once again. And going back to, using it as a classmate, I am a remote student. I am not on campus. I don't, unfortunately, I don't have the access to other college students or other grads. I don't have access to other people in my same circumstance. I don't have, I live in a place where I don't have, I could go to maybe a chat room, maybe I could visit the local campus, but it's so much easier, and I will say easier for me to use AI as that classmate that I don't have access to. And I think we're going to talk about it a little further into what a positive for AI is, that it gives you access to things that you wouldn't have if you are a remote learner. But that doesn't make it perfect. I think that AI is a tool that, just like a computer program, that can give you, it's going to be what we make of it. If we use, I've done a little bit of reading and research into it, and I keep thinking of the analogy of a knife. A knife can be a tool for good, or it could be a tool for bad. It can use to cut out cancer, or it could be used to kill someone. It just depends what you're using that tool for. And that's going to be that human interaction. We make the decision, and we have to remember that we are making the decision, not the machine. And so whatever we ask of it, we are wholly responsible for it. So I'm sorry, going off on a little bit of a tangent, but that's my way of learning process for it. Thank you.
I appreciate that so much, Marco, because one of the things that I talk about with my students is, when you won't all remember, but when Wikipedia first came in,
Yes.
right?
Yes. Oh,
Everyone
so the
was
thing is, I
like,
do remember this.
danger, like this is right, like this
Absolutely.
is going to be
Yeah.
like the end of
Hmm.
society. There will
Yeah.
be no more encyclopedias, there will be no more books. People are just going to look it up, and then that's it, and they're going to use it for their papers and projects. And like, now think of your use of Wikipedia,
Hmm.
right? It's just kind of like, okay, it's
None.
right, like, yeah, yeah, none, or your natural normal, right? Background information thing. And so that Marco reminds me of that conversation, right? That we're like all about it now. But it has, both pros and cons, and it could be used for good or for not great. And so thinking about that is a really helpful perspective. Yeah, we make the decision. I really appreciate that. All right. So, as a student in high flex environments and multimodal environments, right, what responsibilities do students have when using AI in academic settings? I think like professors sometimes give you like, this is what you should do, but in your opinion, what responsibilities do students have?
I can start with that as a student, but also as an educator together. So, as a student, I think the responsibilities are, we make the professors know that we've used it, because a lot of the times the professor will be like, "Oh, this looks like AI." It's like, "Oh, crap, I forgot to tell them I used this." And then, like, I know Hunter has like a no AI policy completely, where like I had a student who used, okay, when in the undergraduate, then one of my students went to Hunter and got caught using Grammarly, the AI version, and got kicked, like dropped from the class because they used the Grammarly Pro and didn't tell his professor, "Hey, I used the Grammarly Pro," and that became an issue. Whereas, like, I think in schools, I think it's important that, I'm not totally pro AI, don't get me wrong, but I think it's important that there's ways where, like, most class sizes in New York City are 34. They still haven't done reduced class sizes in all class sizes. And I think it's important for, like, sometimes you can, if the teacher figures out the right verbiage, we've done this in the past at my old school, where it can help figure out like what is wrong with the grammar, and it explains why which they're changing the grammar of it. And I think that's important, because there's no way that as a teacher you can get to 34 students within the time frame of like when a paper is due. And I think that's important, that there are tools that AI can be used for if there's not enough time in the classroom all the time.
Yeah, I think the that final example that you used with regards to grading is a I have a nuanced response to that. I think that what you're saying is very true. Teachers don't have time and students deserve thoughtful feedback. However, I find it very difficult to fully get behind that logic because I'm uncomfortable using a band-aid that can very easily be incorporated as like, or that can very easily be turned into a load-bearing structure by the institution of education as a whole,
I'm
right?
not saying
So,
grading, I'm saying more just out with the grammar. Like if a
no,
student,
same answer.
okay.
Um, I think that we should not be doing things to allow classrooms to have 34 children in them, right? If you're in a situation where your classroom has 34 children, I totally understand that's like completely overwhelming and you're trying to do right by those kids in that moment. But when it comes to being particularly a special ed teacher, it's so desperately important that I understand the work that my students are doing very, very, very deeply because my job as a special educator is to adapt to the individual needs of the students. And if there are so many students that you're not able to give that individualized support, there are too many students in the class. And we should be using the resources we have to change the structure of the educational environment, not necessarily patch it over. And so, I don't disagree that AI can be used for that. But I think that we as educators should be very, very critical about whether we should be using AI for that, or if we're just contributing to a societal structure that means that over time students will receive less and less individualized support.
I think there's a big fear between in education where the usage of AI from the student and the usage of AI from the teacher,
Mm-hmm.
and they're saying, well, if I as a student am creating things using AI and feeding it to a teacher who's using it to AI to grade it, so we're just feeding the machine back and forth playing ping pong, and the humans are lost in the process. I think that's the fear. So I think as in education, what the importance is, put barriers. Okay, where's my right limit? Where's my left limit? As I would say, where how much of AI do we want to incorporate it? I think it depends on the grade levels. If we're talking about AI in elementary schools, or are we talking about AI in a grad student, AI in what level of usage are we putting to it? We have to define those things. Speaking to the things like 35 children in a classroom. Okay. Now, if a K through 12 setting, that elementary school teacher has 35 students, but then a high school teacher, you're going to multiply that by several periods. So now it's several hundred children. That's a lot of work for a teacher. And I think that's the part that we're missing is that we're not talking about, oh, the issues that are causing that teacher to have that much workload. That teacher that's going back and working on Saturday and Sunday and nights. And we're missing that point. And instead, we focus on, well, AI shouldn't be doing this, or we should be using AI for this. Instead, we put those things aside because we're focusing on the different topics. So, as the responsibility, I think that transparency is the important part when we use AI. If I am using it to enhance my learning, that's one thing. But if I'm using it to replace my learning or replace my product, then that's a whole different story. And when I think of Jacob saying that the university doesn't allow for AI usage, I think my personal feeling is that we're doing a disservice because when we talk to people in business, AI is part of business now. unfortunately, whether you like it or not, it's out there and they are using it daily and they are using it. You know, a business feels that if we don't use AI, we're already falling behind because the competitor is using AI. So we must use AI. And so it's this snowball effect. And so we can't just, bury our heads in the sand and say, well, we're just not going to learn it. No, we need to teach more of it so that we know how to use it, not just say, well, just don't use it. There's so many things in education that we hide ourselves from and say, well, if we just don't talk about it, people just won't do it. There are good people and bad people in this world, and it's up to the human to again make that decision. And unfortunately, humans make bad decisions, and if we don't learn how to use it correctly, we're gonna fall into
Yeah.
onto that side.
I actually want to bring us back to the question really quickly, which is about what responsibilities students have. And I think we've discussed a lot about what responsibilities we have as teachers. But something I wanted to mention with regards to the students is that students do have responsibilities, and they have the same responsibilities that we say they have with regards to copyright protection and intellectual property. But the students have no way of knowing what those responsibilities are unless we teach them explicitly. And I actually totally agree with Marco, which is that, as one of my teachers said, the genie is out of the bottle. It's out. We're not putting it back in. AI is part of the world, and it's something that we have to make decisions knowing about. However, much like with Wikipedia, I think it's incredibly necessary to not necessarily teach the nuts and bolts of how to use AI. So like I don't feel very strongly that we need classes where we teach people how to prompt. Um, but I feel incredibly strongly that we need to explicitly teach and actively teach how to respond to AI like responses to our prompts and when we should be using the tool. It's not appropriate to use a hammer to cut a banana. It's going to be gross. And you also need to understand that when you use the hammer to cut a banana, the mush that comes out of it is not like going to be, it's not what you want for your fruit salad, right? And so we want to be teaching those evaluative skills around AI rather than just sticking our heads in the sand and saying it's not there.
This is, if you're reading the chat, you all, it's like an amazing, amazing conversation. And I think like colleges, universities, P12 schools, we're all grappling with the same thing, right? Not like people have very loose policies. We're creating policies. There's no strict policy, right? And it really does depend right now on individual instructors a lot. So I just wanted to make that clarification. Um, I think the next thought that's coming out of the chat, but also out of our questions, is AI and critical thinking. What effect might it have, right? What benefits or what challenges might it have?
I can
Um,
go ahead.
oh,
Somebody
sorry.
else talk. Go ahead,
I
Marco.
was just gonna say, it's a short one, so don't worry. It should be for augmenting our thoughts or
Yeah.
amplifying what we think. You know, my what is going on in my head might be good or might be bad. Um, who makes that decision is going to be other humans, myself and other people that are going to respond to my thoughts and my actions are going to decide whether that's good or bad. But as I learn, I'm going to learn and say, I need to learn from what's good and bad. The machine can't tell me that. So I will not learn what's good or bad from the machine. Um, and so that's part of the thinking process that has to happen. And so we need to use it to augment our learning. When I read something, okay, if I don't understand this, I can you explain this for me? Not tell me what it says. So help me understand, not tell me. That's where I look at it. Yes. Sorry.
I think that AI doesn't. This is another society is the problem answer. I don't think that AI has any effect on our critical thinking. I think the culture around AI has an effect on our critical thinking. I think that people are incredibly credulous right now, particularly with AI. It's a very exciting new tool, and I love to be excited about a new tool. Gina has watched me get excited about a new tool. Um, but we need to understand that part of having a new tool is learning to use it, and that the new tool isn't the cure-all. It's not a magic button that will solve all of our problems. And so, what I have seen some of the classes that purported to tell me or to teach me how to use AI was incredibly uncritical and credulous use of AI for generative purposes, without any augmenting, without any support from strategies that would help us evaluate what the AI has reproduced. And so, again, AI doesn't have any effect on critical thinking. It's not a brain. It's a tool that we use, but our relationship, our cultural institutional relationship with I think has created some concerns around critical thinking um, that I think that we need to like very intentionally um, sort of not dial back on, but like reinforce. We need to adjust our relationship with the tool such that we're not just like using it to solve problems or create magic solutions.
Right. So I hear you 100%, both of you guys, but there are actual studies that shows that it does diminish critical thinking because a student will write something and be like, oh, that's cool, let's keep writing, and then not have any, like, there are studies being produced right now that are showing that people are forgetting what they even
Right.
talked about or learned about or anything from the AI 5 seconds after they wrote it, because it's not their own thoughts. It's all just whatever AI is distributing to them. So like I have actually seen students who are like, oh, I'm going to use this for like a sentence starter. Great. And then they're like, wait, what was my sentence starter? Like it's a lot of like and I'm really pro the fact that, yes, sometimes a student with an IEP needs to use it for a sentence or to help, like Marco was saying, flesh out his ideas. Because sometimes it's tough for a kid with an IEP to try to get that out of them when it's like the hardest thing. It's like, I can't, it's on the tip of my tongue. But then it's also like, it's not, like you were saying, it's not theirs at the same point. But like, there are studies being produced rapidly right now through, I think, Harvard, which is showing people do not remember the last thing that they put into AI or anything that they have produced with AI unless they've like actually been like, okay, well, let's dig deep into what this is, if it's like something that's related to education or something like that.
So my question for you though is those studies are saying what they've written in the paper is AI is diminishing students' critical thinking. My question is, did the AI do that, or did the student using the AI do that?
I think it's a mixture. I really do. I think it's a mixture of the student, but also the adult, though, like the AI who's saying, like, I think it really is a mixture of how our brains are becoming so, everything needs to go so fast,
Yeah,
where like that they don't know how to like, once they'll read something from AI, they're like, okay. And then they're like, let's figure out the next thing from AI instead of being like, okay, let's try to gather this and try to understand it better.
I guess my pushback there is that I think that that is I don't think that that is I mean, when you invent the ship, you also invent the shipwreck, right? But I don't think that that is like fundamental to the tool. I think it is fundamental to the demands that we are putting on students, or is rather follows from the demands that we are putting on students, the demands that we're putting on ourselves, and overall sort of like this culture of productivity that we've created. I think it's very natural for people to look for shortcuts, but I don't think that a natural consequence of I'm going back to the hammer. Um, I don't no, the hammer metaphor doesn't work here. Anyway, I don't think that it's like I don't think AI is like diminishing the collective intelligence of people. I think it's what we are demanding from people, and the lack of explicit instruction regarding critical use of the tool that is creating the lack of critical thinking.
Well, if I could just add to that, then I think that as educators, the goal then should be looking at what is the process,
Yeah,
not the end
absolutely.
product. And I think too many times we get wrapped around like you must produce this by the end of this. When the production is only what happens at the end, what the process is the important part. We talk about the word learning. Learning is a
Hmm.
process. It is not production. Uh, Production is just, if we want AI to produce, it can produce.
Oh yeah.
That it can do work. That is fine, but it will not do the process for us. It
Hmm.
cannot do the process for us. So that's what I wanted to thank you.
I mean, a lot of schools in New York City are going back to the concept of you have to write in the little blue books because they're so tired of the con of everyone like just being like, oh, let's stick it into AI and it's done.
Hmm.
So a lot of schools are going back to like everyone needs to handwrite things, and it's an interesting concept.
I mean, I love that this conversation, if you're looking at the chat, this conversation has spurred like, I need to rethink the way I assess, right? I
Yeah.
need to rethink the way I scaffold assignments. And to be having the audience think of these things is like so important. All right, I'm going to turn a little bit to impact and thinking about, like, in your opinions, the environmental impact, the impact on academic integrity, the impact on privacy, the impact on authorship. And I'm going to open up the floor.
I have a long one for this one, so if anyone wants to get us started, they can, but I
um,
have I have a whole set.
Let me go first,
Okay.
if you don't mind. Authorship. As I've used it to, like I said, I bring something to it before I start. So if I'm going to write something, I cannot say generate this for me because it will not be me. If I was to write a book and say generate and write this book for me, then it can do it. It'll produce a book for me, but it will not be me. Um, Now, if I write it and I say, these are my beliefs, these are my thoughts, this is what my experience is, and what has shaped all these ideas from what I have. And I say, okay, tell me what my life has been so far. Then it can kind of replicate something that is similar to what I am, but still not me. So we can only use it to create to build something, and then I have to be the author of it and say, okay, that's not what I want to say. That this is what I want to say, or yes, that is exactly what I want to say. That's good, but that takes again me to process what it produced and look at that again. Um, Privacy, I am very skeptical. I think that anything that you put up there is, unfortunately, there are some very bad people out there that want to have everything and will want it. If you put it out there, they're going to take it. So
Hmm.
I'm very afraid that whatever you put out there, unless it's a very secured system, you know, I wouldn't rely on it being completely private. So I'm be very wary about putting uh, medical information on there. People are using it for as therapists. They're putting out their information, and it is free for anybody to grab if they know what they're doing. I think I just saw on the news this week that one of the machines was able to hack into the NSA within hours, um, and it was something that they weren't
Uh,
expecting. So privacy is not something I count on it 100%.
yeah.
Yeah, it's yeah.
I'm gonna springboard off that very briefly, and then I will go into my answer. Which is that actually what you just said reminded me of something that Brian talked about in the keynote. Keynote? Yes. Which was that in the sort of like contained AI, was it a GPT instance, I believe, that existed for the university he works with. Students were 75% of students, I believe, were choosing not to use that contained instance because they didn't trust that the university wasn't essentially spying on them. And even though I know from having researched AI that a contained instance is actually a significantly safer place to put your data and your inquiries. And that's why it, of course, existed for the university. It's very easy for a student to look at that and be like, oh, my professors, this is like the surveillance state, my professors are looking at me, and not necessarily be able to generalize that out to the surveillance state of the GPT instance that's just on the internet collecting your data for funsies, or for the highest bidder. Now that I've sounded like I should be wearing a tin hat, even though I'm right, I'm gonna lean back into my initial response to this, which was the ethical concerns of the user. I'm actually going to paste in my answer into the chat. Oh, it's too long. I'm just gonna paste my questions. Hang on. That's few enough characters. Okay. I'm pasting the questions that I use when I consider the use of AI, and the questions that I believe that we should be like teaching explicitly to our students before they make use of AI. Which is, what is the corpus? So what material is the large language model that we are asking a question to drawing from? Um, as part of that, is it likely that that corpus includes misleading or inaccurate information? And do we expect that there's going to be a great deal of misleading and inaccurate information in the corpus? And then two, is the corpus likely to include contents that was not freely approved of by its creators? And that is huge with regards to the data that large language models have been, and machine learning models have been trained on. ChatGPT in particular, OpenAI has been accused of and sued for, and proven to have scraped data that was not theirs to scrape. And now it's in the soup. Like, you can't take it out once you put the ingredient in. Um, and I am not comfortable engaging with a system that has unethically and without permission stolen and used the intellectual property of creators who I have personal relationships with. And I'm not saying I have personal relationships with every one of those creators, but I have personal relationships with creators. And I understand the violation that people feel when their information has been used to train one of these models without their permission. And so, okay, and that's question number one. Question number two is, if I am generating material, what is my goal for the generated material? So am I generating a list of questions to self-evaluate from? Sure. Am I generating, like in the case of Dr. Kloss, my incredible director of inclusive learning, quick reference information from a contained environment that I am sharing not as a publication, but as a learning or a reference tool for my peers? Um, what am I doing when I'm generating that to ensure its veracity? And if I am planning on sharing it, what am I planning to do in terms of crediting or um, altering in order to, like Marco said, ensure that I am the author of the material and the material represents my understanding, my language use, and my views. And then finally, my last question is there value in me performing this task manually? In other words, will I gain something from doing the process manually, even if it's challenging, time consuming, or scary? And that kind of goes into the 5 moments of need that Brian was talking about earlier as well, but almost from a different perspective, which is that, am I cheating myself of productive struggle by using AI in this instance? And if I am, is it worth more to me to like get this task done, which it might be in the case of my 34 student classroom, um, or is it really, really worthwhile for me to individually read every one of those papers and continue to build my mental model of my students, right? And that final question is the one that most frequently prevents me from engaging with an AI tool, is because I'm a big believer in like the value of practice and of happenstance, and of learning in great detail the rules of any given procedure before I start to break them. Um,
So,
and I can't trust that AI is making the same judgment calls with regards to like breaking rules that I would make.
so I hear you completely, and I also think of it as, again, a special ed teacher, but also like as someone who used to have an IEP myself, where
Hmm.
I've had people tell me, go use an AI to create a goal, or go have this AI write the IEP for you. And it's like, wait, what? Like, how
Yeah.
does an AI know the student better than I know my
Hmm.
student? Because this AI is not sitting in front of the student every day, seeing what they're doing, seeing how they're working. Like, it scares me so much with that, where it's like an IEP is part of an individualized education program for a reason. It's supposed to be
Yeah.
individualized. IEPs AIs do not know who the student is that we're writing the IEP about. So when I've had my previous school tell me where I work, go use this AI to create a goal for the student, or go use this AI to create one thing or another that is correlated directly to the student, it doesn't work because I'm like, but you, you don't, the AI doesn't know the student. The AI doesn't know who is looking in front of you every single day and working. Like, even if you give them all the student work, which is scary to me, the student needs to be able to, you need to be able to say, okay, this is what I see with the student. And AI is not going to be able to, even if you explain it, it's not going to be able to understand that. And I think it's really important as a teacher to see how we're putting information in, but also like what's coming out of it, because it could be completely bonkers and completely wrong. And if you're just relying completely on AI, you're just gonna be like, okay, cool, next, let's just fill this in. And an IEP is not supposed to be that way. It's a federal and state document that shows how a student learns, who the student is, what the student actually needs support with, not just what an AI is saying, this is what the student needs support with.
Yeah, I appreciate that so much. I think we had a question that because of time we'll skip over about the impact of AI on human relationships, right? And thinking about like what that means. Like Jacob, I think you gave a great example with regards to like AI doesn't know my student,
Hmm.
right? AI doesn't really know me. And so thinking about that. The next question I want you to help all of us, right? If you could create one guideline in a sentence for responsible AI use in higher education, what would it be? What should we put on our syllabi? What should we announce in the first day of class?
I haven't workshopped this into a syllabus worthy sentence. Um, but my stupid pithy answer was don't. But I think that Jacob has very fully, completely, successfully, I don't know the right word, elucidated on why that's not a helpful guideline. AI is a tool, it exists, we should acknowledge that. And so like don't is not at all helpful because people are going to. And so saying no is means that you're going to be potentially penalizing students who haven't done anything like egregious, just like forgot to tell a teacher something, and also not penalizing students who aren't not using AI, but are using AI in such a way that they can't get caught, right? And that's not fair, and it's also not like a productive thing to do. My actual sentence is remember that AI is not a person, but instead was built by people, which means that all of the habits, bad and good, and systematic injustices that were invisible to its programmers will be integrated and reproduced by the software itself. So if you want to be a critical change-making student, person, citizen of the world, you need to treat AI with as much criticality as you would treat any other piece of information delivered by any other source or person. Um, period.
So I'll build off of that. I appreciate your take on it. I would build off of that and say, if you do use AI, highlight where you have
Yeah.
used it. So like the professor is aware of it so that like they can see where your own thoughts are, but also where AI's thoughts are and how did they mold together so it could create a conducive and cohesive essay or whatever. I think it's really important that professors are aware of, yes, we are all people are all using AI. Let's put it together into making sure that professors are aware of which is your voice and which is the AI voice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the word transparency on your process, you know, what did you use it for? Why? Those are questions that we should be asking. The point of learning is how to, you know, a little philosophical, but it's about the human experience. You know, what are we doing? Uh, what have we done in the past? What are we doing now? What are we going to do for the future? That all has to do with why we learn anything. So if we are not learning by using the process, then what's the point of using a machine that does it for us, and we're not learning anything from it? So using it transparently and saying this is what I used it for, I think brings a little bit more awareness, not just for the teacher but also for the learner, to say, oh, you know what, maybe I am going beyond what I should have uh, originally used this tool for, and I need to dial this back, or they can be like, okay, this is a helpful thing in my learning. So that's the
To
way
that
I
point,
look
really
at it.
quick with Marco, I think that's also really important so that professors can also see, oh, this assignment was not making sense. Like sometimes I had when I was in college, a professor gave me an assignment was like, this is not making any sense at all. And I didn't have time to go to office hours or something like that. And I would use AI to be like, okay, explain this to me. And it helped, like you were saying in the beginning, Marco. And I think that's really important that we can then explain that and show that to a professor. And like, we're still students, as when I was just a student, I needed accommodations to get through things. And sometimes AI became my accommodation to help me support me with
Mhm.
something. And I think it's important that like professors see even if they've been doing this for years and years as professors, times are changing as humans too, as how we're learning, how we're growing, and what is going on in like I've been teaching now for 4 years. What is going on in the classroom, and how do we interpret this in the essays that they're assigning us? And sometimes they don't correlate, and you had to figure out like some weave of a web to get there.
I appreciate that so much, Marco. And it also reminds me of like, I've never gotten advice or a thought from AI that stuck with me. However, I've always gotten advice from humans that have stuck with me through years and decades. Um, all right, looking at the time, it's been an incredible, incredible discussion. I hope you're all like, I'm going to save the chat. I'll send us the chat too, because the chat has been just amazing. So thank you so much, audience. Any closing words? And I'll have a closing word from all of you.
I can go first and then I'll be done. Um, I feel that I've said a lot of what I meant to say, which is great for me. But one of the things I haven't been able to spend a lot of time discussing is the effects on data centers and the companies that build AI. So I want to be clear, it's not the AI, it's the companies that build them. Uh, the effects that those institutions are having on particularly rural communities and communities where access to water is really precarious. Um, I normally would try to edit out evocative language like scourge from my comments, but evidence shows that AI really, it really, really is a scourge on the environment, particularly the environment of communities that rely on environmental and agricultural resources very directly, and that might not have the economic ability to import those resources. So I'm just dropping a few sources that discuss that in the comments, and people can read those as they may. One of them that's quite good, it's at the end of or it's at the beginning of the second post, um, is some basic guidelines for AI use for from the NEA for teachers.
I'll go next. Then for me, it is comes down to AI is a tool that we, you know, we can't get rid of it now. It's there, but what we're going to do with it in the upcoming years is going to depend on all of us. And to me, it comes down to if it only serves for profit making and making people who have money make more money, then we are going to go down the wrong path. We have to think of it as how can it serve us, humankind? How can it save, you know, our world, whether it's building, better crops, solving diseases like cancer and AIDS, um, terrible, discrepancies between our worlds where people don't have water or food. If we can use it for those purposes and say, it is causing some damage to our world, but the overall benefit is going to be 100 or 1,000 times greater of what we've done versus, oh no, it's just making money for somebody and we're all going to suffer for it. Then we're down the wrong path. So it is, if as educators can take away of like we are going to instill and teach why we should use it or why we should do. That's our job as the older, generation teaching the newer generation. And that's the way I look at it.
I mean, I hear both of you guys, and I appreciate everyone that came in and listened to us. I think it's important to use it responsibly, as we were talking about, but also use it for good. Don't use it for bad. Use it for supporting your students in the way that you see fit for yourself. Like, don't, I feel like that's an important statement of like, this is AI, like everyone's saying, AI is here, but it's also like it can be used to support your students in different ways. Just don't give out their names. But I've had teachers
Good
do that.
Thank
It
you,
advice.
is
Jacob, so
Good
much. That's
scary.
so important.
Good advice. Well, thank you, students. You have been amazing. Thank you, Marco. Thank you, Jacob. Thank you,
Thank you.
Zora. This has been the
Thank
most
you all.
interesting and incredible panel. So thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of the conference. See you all soon. And I hope you all write about this because you
Yep.
all have such amazing, amazing opinions. Thank
Thanks,
you.
everybody.
Take care. Have the
Thank
best
you.
day. Bye.